for Duelist Advanced release day, I want to do a little bit of a deep dive into the new decks from Duelist Advanced, the way we're going to do it today, because I don't have my hands on the cards yet. As soon as I do, as soon as I have the cards for some of these new decks, I am planning to make some maybe deck building streams or even remote duel streams happen next week or the week after. And we're just going to test them in practice. Today, it's going to be more like we're going to look at how some of these newer decks were played in the OCG and think about just how they function and how they might translate over to the TCG. Like what's different in the TCG maybe about the non-engine you play in these decks, or maybe you got to adjust certain ratios and so on and so forth, because of course the OCG is not the same as the TCG. So I have taken a couple of archetypes that we can take a look at OCG deck lists as examples and think about how they will be played in the TCG. And then after that's done, I figured I can create like a first impression tier list for Duelist Advanced format, which is a little early, but the NAWCQ is quite soon. So I figured we might as well get that out there. So my first impression of the format is out there as well. So why don't we get started? Now, hold up. Of course, we have already, I have already done a stream and also a YouTube video where I do take a look at most of Duelist Advance and explain some of the cards. So I am familiar with, at least conceptually, as what some of these cards do, but I haven't actually, for some decks I have, but for some decks I haven't looked at like example decks and how they might be played in the TCG. So why don't we go ahead and start with Lunalight here. So we're using Yugioh Pro Deck's deck search function today, and I have filtered it by competitive decks, which basically means tournament results from the OCG for Lunalight as an example, because Lunalight I feel like is, to me, a little bit of a mystery from the new set. Like basically I have a pretty good idea of, like, because I am, of course, most excited about like Vanquish Soul and Sky Striker, I have a pretty good idea as to how those decks operate and how those decks might work in the TCG. But for Lunalight, it's more like I started looking into the deck, but I don't know exactly what to expect from it in the TCG, and I don't know exactly how scary it is, because on paper it seems extremely scary, because like they have some pretty good win cons, right? Like we can take a look at this list from the OCG here. Almost every Lunalight list that I'm seeing obviously plays at least 2 copies of Liger Dancer and a copy of Baguska, because the crazy synergy in this deck, of course, I mean, most people should know about Lunalight Liger Dancer at this point, because it's completely unaffected by card effects. You can actually just make it alongside a Baguska and it doesn't care about it. So not only do you have to worry about outing Liger Dancer, but you also have to worry about outing Baguska, which can be quite the problem for a lot of decks. Now, I will say, I think, to me it feels like Lunalight is a deck that seems super strong on paper, but like it has to have that. There has to be downsides, basically, because if this deck just worked the way you think it works, or like the scary things about it would happen every game, it would be the best deck in the OCG already, which it's not. Clearly not. It's just like, from what I've heard, I feel like Lunalight can theoretically play through hand traps quite well, but I think the downside of Lunalight is that every single hand trap is somewhat effective against it. And while you can probably play through one hand trap fairly well, multiple hand traps will start to really hurt you, and you might just have to do some, like, I think the full combo for the deck is incredibly scary, but I think all of the compromises into hand traps, they seem mediocre, at least from what I've been told by people that have played a lot of Lunalight. Because it's like, okay, if you get hit with 1 or 2 hand traps, you just make like a Baguska and you pass, or you can only make one Liger Dancer and you pass, which is like, it can be enough, but if your opponent is prepared for the format, then it just won't be, so that's weird. The thing is, everyone is only playing 6 Charmies and roll no real hand traps. See, first of all, that is not, I think that's not super accurate. I think a lot of people are playing at least the Dominus Impulse in their deck if they can, or the Ash Blossom to counter Charmies, or the Imperm. Those are still popular cards, and they will be popular cards. And I don't think it's correct to just assume that the hand trap lineups are not going to change at all after an entirely new main set releases. I don't think that's accurate. I think non-engine lineups are going to change with a deck like Lunalight in the format, especially if it is as hyped as it seems at the moment. Like, people are considering this deck, you know, people are considering playing this deck. People are considering this deck when they're building their decks. It's not necessarily the case. The format does change from Duelist's Advance. Of course, Malice and Mitsurugi and Ryzeal are still relevant decks, and all the cards like Droll and Charmies are still going to be somewhat popular, probably. But I think just assuming that no one is going to play any other hand traps, I don't think is a good idea. Because the format is actually decently diverse. I mean, that was already the case with like the national championships. Even before this set, there was a realistic chance you were playing against 6 or 7 different decks in the tournaments. And with these decks entering the mix, I think that just makes it more diverse, most likely, because these decks, I think, are surprisingly competent at competing with the decks that we already have, even though they might not overtake them necessarily. They definitely compete, and so I think they will have impact on how people are going to approach deck building for this format. Yeah. So yeah, as for Lunalight, this is basically this list I have looked at alongside some other lists already, and this seems to be somewhat the standard ratio for Lunalight cards. So they always play 3 Lunalight Gold Leo because this is by far the best starter for the deck. It's like the one that when it's normal or special, you add a Lunalight monster from your deck to your hand, then you discard a card, and then if a Lunalight is sent to your grave, you can target it and add it back to your hand. So I believe the standard Lunalight 1-card combo, or like the only 1-card combo I think that this deck has is via Gold Leo and other cards that get you to Gold Leo. Like, for example, Tanky searches Gold Leo, or like, I think it's like Foolish can send Silverhound and that gets you to Gold Leo, or Fractal can send Silverhound and that can get you to Gold Leo. So, or Masquerade is like, send a Lunalight from deck to grave, which is like activate Masquerade, send Silverhound, special Gold Leo. So like everything, I think every combo I've seen so far gets you to Gold Leo relatively quickly, right? I don't know if Kaleido Chick is a 1-card combo. Is Kaleido Chick a 1-card combo? Because I feel like if it was, maybe they'd be playing 3 copies of it. It's not. Oh, I see why it's not. Oh, okay, because it sends for cost. Oh, they have anti-synergies in here. Okay. You got to be careful with that when you're playing against Lunalight for the first couple of times. The Kaleido Chick sends for cost from the deck, and Silverhound says if it's sent to grave by card effect. So it cannot activate if you send it for Kaleido Chick. Ooh, that's a huge that's a big thing to be aware of. Both playing Lunalight and playing against Lunalight. So they use Kaleido Chick probably just to dump some stuff into the graves. So you don't, I mean, the Yellow Martin is good in the graveyard, right? For Kaleido Chick. And then future iterations of Kaleido Chick, after you've already sent the Yellow Martin, you probably send some fusion monsters so you can like Miracle Fuse into Liger Dancers. Right? Because Liger Dancer needs Leo Dancer, so you really want a Leo Dancer in the graveyard, but you don't necessarily want to fusion summon it. So you use Kaleido Chick to send a Leo Dancer, it becomes Leo Dancer on the field, and then you can fuse with it from the field into 1 Liger Dancer, and then you can Miracle Fuse with Wolf into the second Liger Dancer by banishing the Leo Dancer from the grave that you sent for Kaleido Chick. Yeah. Okay. Consistency-wise, this deck I think is going to be just fine because like maybe not this build of the deck, but like there's a couple of options that you can add to this deck to make it more consistent. I don't think consistency is going to be your problem because you could play Foolish Burial Goods, which is a very good card in this deck, because you can send Lunalight Perfume. So you can basically, you go goods for perfume, and then perfume is just banish this card from grave, discard a card, add a Lunalight from your deck to your hand. I believe there's also, what is the other one? Lunalight Serenade Dance, which is like the trap card that used to be a one-of back in the day in other Lunalight decks. Lunalight Serenade Dance is... During your main phase, banish this card from your grave, send the card from your hand to the grave, and if you do, special summon a Lunalight monster from your deck. I would assume that if you play Foolish Burial Goods, you're also going to play one copy of this. Only one copy because this effect is actually hard once per turn, whereas for Lunalight Perfume, it is not hard once per turn. Neither of the effects. I'm guessing the reason why they don't play 3 Lunalight Perfumes is because it doesn't actually start anything, right? Because in order to get it to the graveyard, you have to have a Lunalight in your grave already. Other than that, it's a pretty good card. Serenade Dance, discard Harpor. I mean, where are the locks located in this deck? Because I know it has some. If this card is sent to the grave by card effect, special Lunalight from your deck, except Silverhound, but you cannot special summon from the extra deck while you control that monster. Okay, so that lock is gone pretty quickly. Is that the only lock? Okay, so this deck is pretty free as to what it can do. I mean, that explains why you can make a Baguska at the end, I suppose. So I mean, in the OCG, I think it makes sense the way they play this deck. Whether you could play some goods for consistency, I've seen that too. But like for the most part, in the OCG, they play pure Lunalights. I think that makes sense in a Max C format because you just have to focus a certain amount of deck space in your deck around out to Max C. And you want to make sure you can draw those as consistently as possible, which makes me actually curious why they're playing 43 in this one. But for the most part, this is something that you could change when it comes to the TCG. I could see people playing this with, like, because it just happens to just also be a level 4 deck. There is a world where you pair this with Mitsurugi. I don't know. You pair it with Mitsurugi and you make a King of the Feral Imps at some point, or you pair it with, I guess for NA people, pair it with Orchist, because you have a lot of ways to discard Orchist in this deck. I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to approach it, but it is possible. You can make Banshee the Surge Nemesis flag to search Protoss in this deck as well, which I don't know if the deck needs like crazy win cons like that, because I feel like if you're comboing, you can already win. Ryzeal, of course, also, I mean, when you're talking rank 4s, we're always going to have to talk about Ryzeal. I don't know if Ryzeal Lunalight is the way to go, because the Ryzeal cards, like, you can access the Ryzeals from the Lunalights, because the Lunalights can make a rank 4. But the problem is you cannot really access the Lunalights with the Ryzeals. Like, the Ryzeals would not work as a starter for Lunalight. And if you ever have to, like, if you go second and you have to start with X Ryzeal or something like that, you're going to ruin your entire deck. Like, because if you're locked into rank 4s from the extra deck, the Lunalight part really doesn't do anything. Like, not being able to fuse at all seems weird. It would have to be a completely different version of the deck, basically. Like, you'd be completely playing a different deck. Ryzeal go into Fire Fist, search Tenki. Yeah, that is cheating because that needs 2 level 4 Beast Warriors. You can't do that. So I don't think Ryzeals can actually start the Lunalight combos. And even if you could, even if that was possible, if you search at Tenki and you're locked into level 4s, rank 4s, you can't make any of the fusions, so it wouldn't even be good. So yeah, I personally, I think with cards like Droll and Lockbird and Molcharmi Fuvalos in mind, I would probably guess that the most common way to play Lunalight in the TCG will also be pure Lunalights. And it's just gonna depend on, you know, it's gonna be a meta call basically to play Lunalight, because I think in a meta game where people are at least somewhat prepared for it, I don't think it's that strong. And don't confuse that with me saying it's bad. I don't think it's a bad deck at all. I just think if people are prepared for it, which means that people play like Imperms, Ashes, maybe even Bestials and Crows and stuff like that, because all those cards have value against it. If people play a decent amount of those cards, then I think the deck is in trouble, because you can't really, like, basically what we talked about earlier, in an environment where everyone plays Charmies and Droll as their only hand traps. Like, sometimes that was the case in the last format, right? A lot of people played just those cards because they were the most efficient against Ryzeal and Malice. In a world like that, I think Lunalight can be a pretty good meta call, because you can just pull through. Like, you get Fuvad, you just do it. You don't care if they draw more Charmies or if they draw Droll and Lockbird. Who cares? I'm gonna make 2 towers and Baguska, and that's basically GG, even if you have 10 cards in your hand, right? And so that's always dangerous. If people start playing Imperm Veiler again, Mitsu and Malice are going to be really happy. I mean, yeah, I guess that is, I mean, that you are summarizing the quote unquote difficulty with super diverse formats, which as of now, I don't see a reason why the next format wouldn't be more diverse than the current one, because they definitely are adding decks that people want to play, right? Like Vanquish Soul, Sky Striker, and even Lunalight are decks that people are interested in at the moment. And they are, like, while none of them is taking over the top spot instantly, they are good enough to be considered playable decks, right? And so that is a fair point. You know, you're going to have to make a decision for the upcoming format. Which decks do you want to respect the most in your main deck? Do you want to make the concession for Lunalight and other decks maybe to include like Imperm Veiler, whatever? Because those cards, I mean, it's not like Imperm is always terrible against Mitsu and Malice. There is uses for them, which is why I think they will return in some capacity. Because, like, even against Ryzeal, sometimes an Imperm hits them really hard if they happen to only have one Ryzeal name. Or if you can hit the Duo Drive or whatever. You know, there is worlds where the Imperm still has value against those decks. So it's not like a completely dead card in those matchups. So I do think these cards are probably going to make a return to respect Lunalight a little bit. Which is going to make life harder for Lunalights. Yeah. There's another card that I wanted to quickly bring up. I think it's been going up in price in the TCG as well, and that is because of Lunalight, and that's Heavy Polymerization. So the reason why Heavy Polymerization is hyped up in Lunalights is because, of course, when you're going second, you can just fusion summon a Liger Dancer with it immediately, which basically outs every board if it doesn't get negated. So the way this card works, because I mean, this card has seen 0 play so far. Fusion summon a fusion monster from your extra deck using 3 or more monsters from hand or field as material. You can also banish monsters from your extra deck as material up to the number of monsters your opponent controls, but you lose life points equal to the total attack of monsters banished this way when the monster is fusion summoned. So Liger Dancer is a fusion monster that needs 4 monsters as material. Lunalight Leo Dancer plus 3 Lunalight monsters. So that's going to cost you a lot of life points. You can't even afford to fully fuse the Liger Dancer without using anything from hand, right? Like you cannot take 4 monsters from your extra deck, because then you just lose, right? Because Leo Dancer is 3,500, and then you would take like 2 Perfume Dancers. That's already 75. So that's, and then you have to use one Lunalight from your hand, right? So like, let's say you draw Heavy Polymerization and a Black Sheep or whatever, then you can make Liger Dancer with for 7,500. Which honestly, even though you're taking 7,500 damage to summon a Liger Dancer, that can potentially answer the entire board, right? Like you just like summon Liger Dancer into your opponent's board, activate the effect, send the Lunalight from extra deck to grave, destroy all special summon monsters, the board is gone, you have it towers, and you still have the rest of your cards in hand. So that's the reason why Heavy Polymerization is being hyped right now. I mean, you can actually, they actually have prices here on the site. I don't even know if it's accurate, but the card market price seems to be 14 euros for Heavy Polymerization, which I don't think it was that expensive when it came out because no one really cared about it. Yeah, something you guys just said in chat. I think you cannot use Mud Dragon for this. The Mud Dragon Synchro. Hold up. I believe that doesn't work because... So this card, of course, would be perfect because it is 500 attack, but this card can be used as a substitute for any one fusion material whose name is specifically listed on the fusion monster card, but the other fusion materials must be correct. I don't think it works because I don't think this effect applies when it's in your extra deck. Yeah, I just don't think that, I don't think that's how it works. So yeah, there's not, unfortunately, not a way to save life points on this thing. Liger stops you too, can't use substitutes. Ah, must be fusion summoned with the above fusion materials. Oh, that also means you cannot use, does that mean you cannot use replacements? Is that what that says? I guess it does, yeah. Yeah. So, but that's not the reason why the Mud Dragon doesn't work, right? So like the Mud Dragon just double doesn't work. Because I think even if it didn't say that, it still couldn't do that. I think that's just mechanically not possible with Heavy Polymerization. Okay, yeah. Anyways, Heavy Polymerization is an option for this. Now, I will say, I don't think you can summon, I don't know all the Lunalight fusion monsters attack points by heart, but I think the smallest one is Perfume Dancer with 2,000. Which means that because you have to use Leo Dancer, which is 3,500, and Perfume Dancer, I think, is the smallest other one that you can use, you will always, if you want to use 3 monsters from your extra deck, you always have to pay 7,500. There's no way to pay less. Which means there's some pretty nasty counterplay to Heavy Poly into Liger Dancer if you want to use 3 monsters. Because there is... You take 1 from hand, and then you take 7,500 damage, which means that if your opponent is playing, like, there's a couple of things that meta decks can do to punish this, if they expect Heavy Polymerization. Of course, I mean, the obvious one is Vanquish Soul, which if that's a meta-relevant deck, you can never Heavy Poly against them, because you just die to Heavy Burger, or the Vanquish Soul trap card. They both inflict way more damage than you can take after a Heavy Poly. So you do just lose if you do this against what's it called? Against Vanquish Soul. But there's other decks actually, because you guys are already mentioning it, but I did think about this, and like if like Board Breaker Lunalight with Thrust and Heavy Poly actually becomes a thing, I feel like what I would do in a Ryzeal deck is I would just play a Gagaga Cowboy in my extra deck, and I would just legit make it on turn 1, because they're gonna let you full combo, right? Like their plan is to let you full combo and then break your board with Heavy Poly. And then you can just burn them for 800, and then they can't really heavy poly anymore. It ruins the entire game plan. Because 800 damage makes it impossible to take 3 fusion materials from the extra deck, which is kind of stupid. Or, I mean, okay, yeah, sure. I guess you can also just Protoss them, which is the other problem with board breaker approaches for any deck, especially a deck that is all darks. I don't think this deck can be played as a board breaker deck. Is the quote unquote unfortunate news. I don't know how unfortunate it really is, because board breaker with heavy poly into a tower doesn't seem that healthy either. But yeah. Just not use 3. I mean, yeah, you can use 2, but then you have to use 2 other Lunalights from your hand. At which point you probably have nothing left after, and you might not even be winning on that turn. And then if your opponent plays an out to the Liger Dancer, you might just lose to it. It's not as auto win if you have to spend 3 cards for Liger Dancer. Play Dogwood? Yeah. Let the Ryzeals are gonna make Cowboy to counter heavy poly, and then the heavy poly Lunalight decks are gonna play Dogwood to gain life points to counter the counters. No, I don't know. I think the reality of things is the following. I think the most likely way we're gonna see Lunalight is pure with a decent amount of hand traps, not board breakers in the main deck. I mean, maybe you're gonna play like some thrust or some droplets, but for the most part, because this deck is also all darks, it can play Dominus Impulse. I don't think it's too super smart to skip on Dominus Impulse in the upcoming format. It still seems like a phenomenal card. So like, I think we're going to see this deck play Ash, Impulse, maybe Imperm, maybe Charmies, maybe Droll, depending on how the format shapes out. Maybe some board breakers in Thrust and Droplet or something. And I think heavy polymerization is a strong side deck option for this deck, because if there's ever a matchup that doesn't punish this card because they don't have burn damage or something like that, and doesn't have an Omni Negate on their end board, this is a legit win con. 100%, right? It's a legit win con in some matchups. So I think it's an interesting side decking option. Can you send Lunalight Tiger and extra deck for this? I don't see why not. Yeah, if you have a face-up Tiger in the extra deck, or a face-up Wolf, the way the card is worded, you could use it, yeah. I lost to Lunalight yesterday with Punk because the life points were lower and my Psychic End Punisher wasn't unaffected anymore. Yeah. Did they, like, after heavy poly? I guess that can happen, yeah. But no, I think that's how Lunalight is gonna roughly work for now, and I think that is a strong concept. It might not be the best deck of the format, but I think it is a working concept. I think you can make this deck as consistent as you would like, really, because this build here is not even close to max consistency. You can do so much more for consistency in this deck. You can play up to 3 Foolish Burial Goods, which is another basically 1-card starter for the deck if you include Serenade Dance, and I mean, they're already playing in Lunalight Perfume, so it's really easy to get this deck into very strong consistency ranges. Heavy poly is way worse if the opponent ends on only 1 or 2 monsters. That's the thing, right? There's a couple of decks in the format at the moment that might not actually end on infinite monsters. Like, there are some, like, I don't know, Pure Mitsu or something, they might not end on more than 2 monsters. And then one of those 2 monsters can likely even be an IP Masquerena, so they can, like, in response to the heavy poly, they can go down to 1. So you'd have to, like, use 3 Lunalights from hand. You know. Unfortunately, the deck doesn't have a super high amount of good quality starters that don't just lead to the normal choke points. So, like, so what you mean? Well, what you mean is, like, if the gold, I heard that Gold Leo is a pretty good imperm target, because you're not only missing out on the add and the discard, but you're also missing out on the add back later potentially. So, like, Lunalight Gold Leo really does a lot for this deck, right? Like, it searches, it discards anything from your hand that you want in your grave right now, and then, like, you can just keep going and get the other effect later or even immediately. It's it's pretty difficult if Lunalight Gold Leo gets negated. But I do think Foolish Burial Goods seems like a very strong extender. Because if you play Serenade Dance, Foolish Burial Goods just lets you special summon from deck, which seems pretty strong. You can get through a lot with a full engine hand, but with low engine, it's rough. I mean, yeah, to be fair, though, that is kind of the case for most modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks. I guess the biggest question these days when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh decks playing through hand traps is how well does one extender pair against their second hand trap? Do you know what I mean? Because, like, what I mean by this is, like, when you play when you play like a, let's say, Snake Eye Fiendsmith back in the day, or Malice now, where let's say they imperm your normal summon, if you have one extender, their second hand trap usually doesn't do as much anymore, right? What I mean by this is you normal summon Snake Eye Ash, they imperm it. You special summon Diabellstar, they imperm that as well. Now, because you have two bodies on the field, you can go Fiendsmith and then Promethean and bring back the Ash and basically do almost full combo anyways, or pretty much full combo anyways. So, like, the second card in your hand beats even the second hand trap, right? Like, the 2-card combo demands 3 hand traps, which is, first of all, I think terrible game design, but that is sometimes the quality that some modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks have. And the same is true for Malice, where it's like they normal summon Dormouse, you have imperm for it, they link it off, and they go like, I don't know, March Hare or Bestial or whatever. And at that point, even a second imperm is not going to feel very good. Or even like an impulse, right? Like, I guess you can impulse no, they make Lingeribo. Like, you can't even impulse, right? So, like, the second hand trap feels bad if they have the extender. How does Lunalight work in that regard? Like, let's say they normal summon Gold Leo, activate effect, I imperm it, and then they have an extender. Like, what would even be an extender in this scenario? Is Lunalight Masquerade an extender? Fractal? Tenki for Fractal. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's something I actually haven't talked about yet. But yeah, the Fractal is in here because you can send this card from hand or field to the graveyard, send a level 3 or lower beast, beast warrior, or winged beast from your deck to the graveyard. So that means Fractal can just send Silverhound for a free special summon from deck. So that's why there's a Fractal in every single Lunalight deck list, because you can search it with Tenki, and basically it makes Tenki emergency teleport, pretty much. Which honestly makes me think, if you want more consistency and extenders, you can even play. I could see people play multiple Fractals, because that doesn't even seem like a bad card to hard open. Because I'm pretty sure it's a starter, but it's also a good extender. So, like, there's a couple of cards that Lunalight can play to have better extension and more consistency. Which is like, you can play goods, you can play more Fractals. There's a couple of options. The problem is non-engine. The problem is non-engine for this deck. It does seem like the kind of deck that doesn't want to play infinite non-engine, because the more non-engine you play, the worse you play into hand traps as well, because like, just normal summoning Gold Leo as the 1-card combo, if you open a bunch of non-engine, it's not going to be reliable. Leo into Almirage and then Perfume revives. Yes, if you manage to fit Almirage in the extra deck, then the Perfume is also a phenomenal extender, because Gold Leo is small enough to be linked off into Almirage, and then as long as you have a target for Perfume in the grave, that cooks, right? So I do think this deck is interesting. Also, I mean, you can use Lunalight Black Sheep, discard itself, add Poly from your deck to your hand, and then you can use Perfume to bring it back. Like, there's random 2-card combos for this deck, right? Like, for example, Kaleido Chick plus Perfume, Black Sheep plus Perfume, all those random things. You know, I think Kaleido Chick plus Tiger is also fine. That was always a good combo. So all those random combinations just work. Also, I think Perfume Dancer just needs any 2 Lunalights, so you can draw like Poly with 2 random Lunalights, like Martin, Silverhound, Poly. just plays, you know? So it's not always about one-card combos with this deck, but still, I think more Fractal and Foolish Burial good stuff is interesting for you. Are we going to do some TCG deck building, for example, Paleo? I have a YouTube video already planned for Paleo post Duelist Advance. It's going to come out as in a little bit. It's going to be like a scripted thingy. Can we talk about Boral Sword? This is something I was curious about. I did see Boral Sword in almost every single Lunalight deck list in the OCG, and I was wondering why. I was wondering why almost every single Lunalight deck list is playing Boral Sword. Because I don't really see a need for it, I guess. I guess it does beat Liger Dancers in the mirror match. It outs double towers. It's in case you get debarriered. Maybe it's just a good multi-purpose card. It can win under debarrier, I suppose. It can out Liger Dancers in the mirror match. I guess the problem is, like, look, is that realistic? Just for a second. Is it real? I mean, do you even know? Wait, no. This thing is not unaffected by Lunalights. This doesn't matter. You don't need to out Liger Dancer with something like Boral Sword. You can just Liger Dancer your opponent's Liger Dancer, right? Like it's like the mirror match seems to be completely weird with this deck because the towers is only a towers against not the mirror match, right? So I feel like that cannot be the argument, because also at the same time, how would you ever out a Liger Dancer with Boral Sword? Because Liger Dancer just Raigekis you twice, right? That's because that's the tough part about Liger Dancer. If this was just a 3800 towers, then you wouldn't care about it. But it's a towers with Raigeki, so it outs the outs. Have to make sword with IP. Yeah, but like okay, who's gonna be there and be like, oh, my opponent has IP Masquerena and 2 other monsters on the board. And I have 2 Liger Dances. You know what? Let me see your next step. Let me see the next step. Let me see what's next first. There's no way. Let me find out what you're cooking over there. I don't know. I don't think that's real. You combo it with Dingirsu? There's no Dingirsu. I mean, in Lunalights, that doesn't make sense. Right? In other decks, okay, sure. Maybe if you're playing Orchest, there is an argument to play Boral Sword now. This is actually something I haven't even talked about or thought about much about Orchest, because we don't have Orchest in EU. But like, sure, if you're playing Orchest now, there's a world where you make Dingirsu to protect your stuff from Liger Dancer pops, and then you can make Boral Sword and just rip apart their board. Actually, it seems fairly easy to out for Orchest. I think the biggest problem for Orchest would be the Baguska that you have to get rid of first before you can do meaningful other things, because like a lot of your starters, or some of your starters actually, not all of your starters, but like the Girsu is a lot worse into Baguska, for example. The Orchest Lunalight tier 60 card pile plays Dingirsu into Boral Sword. It's funny because like Lunalight, if I remember correctly, Lunalight Orchest was a thing in 2019, right? At some point. I think so. I think, and I know Lunalight was a thing, and Orchest was a thing, but I feel like at some point they were already combined. It's pretty funny that like both of those decks are getting pretty good support at the same time. So maybe there's a world where they are played together again. Didn't you play it once at a YCS? No, I never played Lunalight at a YCS. I played Orchest at YCSs, but never played Lunalight. There was one YCS where Lunalight, I think Lunalight won it, but I think that was without Orchest. That was YCS Ghent, I believe. At that YCS, I played Thunder Dragons. I didn't play Lunalight. You did play Orchest at a YCS. I remember the 3 engages or 4. Yeah, thank you. I do too. I remember those as well. Thank you. Yeah. I think Lunalight is an interesting deck that, even though the win condition for it is pretty toxic, I think it has a spot in the format. And I do think it's relatively, I don't want to say underexplored because it is being played in the OCG, but of course there's always this question mark of how is the deck that is performing a certain way in the OCG going to perform when it comes to the TCG? And we're going to talk about the same thing with other decks now from Duelist Advance. I think this deck has a chance to see play. I think it is very, very dependent on the non-engine that people play in the format, though. I think Lunalight is a deck that not only just for the next format, but also just like for the next maybe year or two, or maybe even longer, who knows, because this win condition might just never be outdated, you know? But like for the foreseeable future, there's always going to be this option of, if people are not playing the correct non-engine in the format to deal with Lunalight at the moment, you can just bring out the Lunalights again and go crazy with it. You know, like if there's ever a format where no one is respecting Lunalight and everyone is playing just like Charmies and Droll and no other hand traps or whatever, then Lunalight can be a good meta call. And I think that is important to be aware of if you want to like make those meta calls at some point. I know some top players who are going to be on it for NAWCQ. I mean, it seems like an interesting deck for to make a meta call with it, especially maybe early on. I suppose I can see it being a better call the earlier you make it, when people are not like ready to deal with it yet. Especially for the NAWCQ, I think it's very difficult to estimate the deck distribution, like, because I mean, for nationals in Europe, right, I was pretty confident about just playing Purulia, Fuva, and Droll in my main deck, because I knew, okay, Malice and Ryzeal, #1 decks, and Mitsurugi, Ryzeal, #1 decks to worry about. Everything else I can handle with the side deck, it's fine, but like those are my main focuses. And the thing is, like, if you do that again for Euros or NAWCQ, Lunalight farms those kind of decks. It really does. Like, if you're only playing Purulia and Fuva and Droll, I think Lunalight cooks you, right? How is this deck different than something like Raid Raptor was? I think it's just better. It's the concept is not super different. The concept is just better. I just think this deck has higher quality cards than Raid Raptor. Also, they are not birds, which is good. For the most part. Some of them might be. Hugin is not a bird. Shut up. We've had this discussion. We've been over this. I've seen a Lunalight go into a Raid Raptor Xyz. Yeah, that's some evil stuff right there. Okay, let's move on to another deck. Sky Striker. Sky Striker, I was actually very happy to see it. It does have a decent amount of tops in the OCG. What is this Sky Striker Malice? It does have a decent amount of tops in the OCG at the moment. And I do want to talk about Sky Striker because it is one of the decks that I am considering for the EUWCQ. I said it before. Currently, my favorites for the EUWCQ are Vanquish Soul or Sky Striker because I really want to play one of those decks. It's more like I want to make those decks work because I want to. You know, I want to play those decks because they look very enjoyable to me. So let's talk about the exact position that they're going to be in, right? Because I want to play the deck does not necessarily make it good. And while I am willing to play like a cool deck over something like, I don't know, playing Mitsurugi again, even though Mitsurugi is also cool, but like, I would like to play one of those new decks. Let's phrase it like that, if they're good enough. Because I still, even though we are qualified for Master Duel Worlds, I still care about Euros. I still want to do well at Euros if I can. So I'm only going to bring one of those two decks if I feel confident it can perform. And with Sky Striker, of course, the new support, and this is the frustrating part, there are 3 cards in this extra deck already that we cannot play that came out like ages ago in the OCG. Well, Amatsu is new, but like, when did Camellia come out in the OCG, dude? Does it say on this page when it came out? No. When did they get... Hold up, let me check. Sky Striker Ace Camellia. Sky Striker Ace Camellia released in... 2023. Jesus Christ. So this card came out 2 years ago in the OCG. Blind streamer. Oh, I'm blind. It says here. Okay, I was looking down here. Okay, yeah, OCG date. Yeah, okay. I could have saved some time there. My bad. 2023. And then there is Combined Maneuver Engage 0, which came out in 2024, which is over a year ago at this point. And then there's Sky Striker Ace Amatsu, which that's recent. That is this year, in April. So that's even in the OCG, that's not even 3 months old. But all 3 of these cards, we do not have in the TCG for this deck, which is very odd to me. I feel like those were the perfect imports in Duelists Advance, and I still don't understand why we didn't get them. My only guess that I have is that they are saving these for some other product this year so that they can make it more attractive rather than Duelists Advance. Which is also, I mean, I feel like Duelists Advance could have used 1 or 2 extra chase cards. I think that would have been cool. But my guess is they're saving it for, I don't know, like Megatins or something, where they like they want to just throw in a couple extra chase cards. That's what I'm thinking. Other than that, I can't think of a reason why we wouldn't get these cards like in Duelist Advance. It makes no sense to me. Maybe they're just like fine with releasing them like a month or 2 after Duelist Advance, but I'm hoping we get these this year. But that means we're gonna have to deal with the fact that we don't have those cards for the EUWCQ. There, boss, thank you for the 5 months. Rods, thank you for the 24. Shimmer Scanner, 29. Stas, William C. Johnson, Cami Sosa, TT9911, and Acunum. Thank you guys all for the support. I appreciate you guys so much. Okay, what does this mean for Sky Striker in the TCG? I personally think, I have thought about this for a while now. I think Sky Striker should go first in the TCG now with the new cards. I think the direction that this deck wants to go in is it wants to be a deck that picks first if it gets the option, but it still is going to be one of the decks that can go second decently well if you lose the dice roll or if it is post side deck, or you could even consider for certain matchups to have a side decking strategy to go second post side deck when your opponent isn't expecting it. You know, when you let's say you go first game 1, you do your thing, you win, then you lose game 2, and then you side deck in a certain fashion to go blind second game 3 when they don't anticipate you to. This is something that you can do. I do think the Sky Striker setups for the upcoming format are going first are now finally good enough. I feel like personally, because with the addition of Sky Striker A0, finally Ray is a good starter again, because Ray now searches engage, and you have some pretty strong setups. You can draw extra cards with engage. Setting up Lemnis Gate, I think, is incredibly powerful. Non-target bounce is very, very strong. Often even non-target bounce for 2 cards. And I think Widow Anchor Take is not a bad interruption in this upcoming format, because let's say you negate and take an Ice Ryzeal from a Ryzeal deck. That means they cannot just special summon Sword to extend next to it if they have it. So that's neat. In general, Sword Ryzeal will not be an extender against Widow Anchor, which is neat. Like that's good. But in general, it's just like the deck just has the Sky Striker engine itself used to have like no disruptions on the opponent's turn. Outside of just like 1 or 2 Widow Anchors that you were setting. Now you have, out of just the Sky Striker cards, like out of 1 or 2 card combos from Sky Striker, you will get like 4 disruptions or something like that, right? Like you have Widow Anchor to take, you have Lemnis Gate to bounce 2 and recycle some stuff. Then you have Lemnis Gate effect in the graveyard to link summon a Zeke to banish a card, or a Azalea to destroy a card. Because these 2 previously were not able to be summoned on the opponent's turn, because they both say must be link summoned, so you can't special them with linkage or ray. But Lemnis Gate allows you to perform a link summon, which is pretty neat. In the TCG, there's a couple of changes I think that are going to happen to Sky Striker lists, at least from what I'm seeing at the moment, or what I'm considering at the moment for Sky Striker. The first big question mark I have when it comes to this deck is whether you're going to play Pot of Desires or not, because on the one hand, I am aware that Pot of Desires is an incredibly strong card in this sort of concept in Sky Striker. Drawing you 2 cards makes your deck more consistent, puts a spell card in the graveyard, so I do understand wanting to play Pot of Desires. However, I have a couple of thoughts about Pot of Desires in this deck in particular. I don't think you have to be worried about losing like too many of your engages or too many of your Widow Anchors or whatever. That used to be sometimes the case. Sometimes it was like, oh, I lost 2 engages and now it's like weird, or I lost 2 Widow Anchors and now I'm going to run out of Widow Anchors or something. I think that sort of thing is going to be not a problem anymore with Lemnis Gate. Even though in this build in particular, I would be worried about banishing my 1 of Lemnis Gate, because I do think that is one of the strongest parts of the end board for Sky Striker. Like, I would be hella scared to banish the 1 of Lemnis Gate. I would probably play 2 Lemnis Gate if I was playing Pot of Desires in this deck. But that's a different story. The thing I'm more worried about with Pot of Desires is how you have to build your deck if you want to play it. Because this build is playing 2 Rose, and let me tell you, Rose is not a good draw in this deck. Rose is pretty darn bad. I mean, I guess if your hand is like super terrible, having Rose is better than having like no starter, because you can still, I mean, going second, you can still Rose into Hayate, send engage, and then Kagari it back. Like, it can play. And going first, if you have nothing else, at least it's Shizuku Pass, which is still bad, but like, you know, it's something. But for all normal hands, for all like hands that already have a play, like a Ray or a Linkage or an Engage or a Rhoda or something like that, Rose is just a liability to have in your hand. It's not good to draw, because it does, as opposed to Ray, Rose cannot go into Sky Striker A0, which is pretty bad, and that's kind of iffy on it. But of course, Rose is now, you know, while it was already being played in Sky Striker, but it is now more mandatory than ever before, because you need it in the deck for Sky Striker A0 to be an interruption, of course, right? Because this card has a second effect next to being able to search a Sky Striker spell. You contribute this card, special summon Sky Striker, Ray, and Rose from your deck and or grave, then you can destroy a card in the field. In order to resolve this effect, you need to be able to summon both. You cannot just summon Ray and no Rose. You have to have a Rose in deck or graveyard, which means that you're going to have it somewhere. Which means that because Rose is so important now, if you want to play Pot of Desires, you have to probably play a second copy of Sky Striker Ace Rose, because otherwise, if you banish the one of Rose, you just can't resolve the pop effect of 0 anymore, which is pretty bad if you can't do that. Yeah. Can Striker play Impulse? Dude, look, funnily enough, even though Sky Striker A0 is a light monster, I have seen some people mess around with it, with Dominus Impulse. I wouldn't recommend it, because I do think this card is too important. But it's not like 100% impossible. There's like a world where you can still win the game off of just Kagari and Shizuku because of Lemniscate's new addition. Because everything else still works, basically, right? I mean, Rose no effect doesn't really matter, but like you can still go Kaina, you can still go Shizuku. You can't Hayate, which is sometimes big when you go second. So like, maybe you play one as a Songs target. Like if I mean, Songs of the Dominators is just like an option for this deck. I don't know how important this card is going to be in the TCG. Not even every version of it plays it in the OCG. This was just the most recent top use Songs of the Dominators. I don't know how important this is, but let's talk about this deck more as like on a general level. Like I currently am considering playing this deck at the European Championship because I think it looks really fun. And I think the way this deck interacts with the opponent, the way this deck interrupts the opponent now seems incredibly fun, because it's not about like omni negating all their stuff or whatever. It just has like, I just think this deck plays really cool. You know, like take your opponent's cards with Widow Anchor, use Lemniscate to non-target bounce, then link on the opponent's turn into Zeke or Azalea to banish or destroy something. Zero, float, and pop. Like I just think it's a really fun-looking deck. But I am a little bit worried about a couple of things. First of all, even with the new cards, even with the 0 ability to pop and the Lemniscate non-target bounce and link summon into Zeke or Azalea, I feel like this is probably the deck with one of the more fairer end boards in the game, which, I mean, of course, to me is appealing because I think that sounds fun, but it is also somewhat of a downside, let's be real. I mean, this end board is good, but it is not, it's not as powerful as like a Malice end board or whatever. The end board is nothing, basically. Okay, that is definitely an exaggeration. That is not true. The end board is good. I think the end board is good enough to compete. It is not as unfair as other things, but it is a solid end board with a pretty solid backup, like really solid setup for grind games as well. It's not nothing. That is not true. But it is on the weaker side if you compare it to some other decks. Now, I will say, I think this deck is one of the better decks to go second with into the upcoming format. Like, if you just happen to lose the dice roll, because I would still go first with this deck. But if you happen to go second, I think this deck is pretty solid. The one, I mean, I guess it's the elephant in the room, because I know some people in chat have already been saying it. I think my biggest problem with this deck is simply Droll and Lockbird. That is quite simply my biggest issue with this deck. I think if we weren't in a Droll and Lockbird format right now, I would be basically playing this deck for Euros 99% of the time. Not because I think it would be the best deck by far then, but just because I think it would definitely be good enough and I would really enjoy it, and I think I could make it work. And I think the fact that Droll and Lockbird is not only, I mean, saying that Droll and Lockbird is in the format right now would be an understatement. Droll and Lockbird is everywhere, which has me worried about this deck. Maybe not so worried when I get to go first, because, you know, people are, there are ways to deal with Droll and Lockbird when you go first. Of course, Cult by the Grave is limited in the TCG, but like, you got Called By, you got Talents, you got Thrust for Black Goat or something, or other traps. There's ways to deal with Droll when you go first, because you get your first search or draw or whatever, and then you go like, okay, well, Thrust for Black Goat, set Imperm, set Widow Anchor or whatever, like, it can be fine, right? When you go second and you get drolled behind their board, I think then we have a problem every time, and that's going to happen a decent amount of the time, which is also why I don't think this deck can blind second, because Droll, I think, is too popular for that. which is a tough one to crack. I'm gonna be honest with you. This is why currently out of the 2 decks I wanted to play at Euros, if possible, Sky Striker and Vanquish Soul, I'm leaning more towards Vanquish Soul at the moment because, I mean, it's the deck we're going to talk about next. But that deck I think is not nearly as weak to Droll Lockbird as Sky Striker, funnily enough, because Vanquish Soul searches a lot as well, but Vanquish Soul doesn't care on which turn it does it. So like you go first, you summon, you search, you get drolled, you're like, okay, rock, pass, and do it all on your opponent's turn. With this deck, it's a little different. Nonetheless, I think there is a world where Sky Striker is still good enough. There are ways around it. You can also, I have seen I believe it was a deck profile that was from the Sneak weekend where they played the Sneak with the new cards, and it was a Sky Striker deck profile I think that won the tournament, and it was using Drolls in the main deck alongside a cross-out designator for Droll and Ash. So I think that is currently what I would try with Sky Striker. Is like I had a Sky Striker list that I made. I'm probably going to show it off at some point once I worked on it a little bit more. But my first attempt at the deck was like I was playing 3 Ash and 3 Droll with Crossout, because I think Crossout is like Ash Blossom is also fairly annoying for the deck sometimes. So I liked the ability to counter those 2 specifically with Crossout. And then at that point, you have like a couple of hand traps, and then I played mostly spells after that. I didn't play like Imperm or Songs of the Dominators. So yeah. The guy posted notes on his thoughts of the deck, said he's working on an article. Oh, it's the OCG top. Yeah, the OCG top. Yeah. What did I say? Okay. Well, I'll be on the lookout for the article if they end up writing one. But yeah. How does it out a tower? With Sky Striker, how would you out the Lunalight tower when you go second? That's a good question. You don't, from what I'm seeing right now. And also, if I'm thinking of the list that I had, I don't think you do. I have seen this card. I have seen this card in a lot of Sky Striker decks because of Lunalight, I think. There is Hamp. I don't think you would ever main deck Hamp. But I guess that does give you a realistic way to out a Liger Dancer. It is only once per turn, so if they actually get to double Liger Dancer, then you do have a problem. It does seem to me that this list is pretty heavily siding for Lunalight because they also have Karma Cannon. So like you thrust for Karma Cannon that outs both Liger Dancers, which is pretty good. That's another thing, right? Against Lunalight, they can't really pop your back row, right? In general. So when you play Karma Cannon, you might be able to just set Karma Cannon and then wait a turn and then play the turn after you Karma Cannon away their resources. They have Hound Negate. They do have one spell Trap Negate that you'd have to somehow force, yeah. You'd have to like force that before you thrust, yeah. Because as soon as you thrust and they see the Karma Cannon, they know what's up and they know to not use the Hound on anything else. Yeah, that's difficult. Can you Black Goat the towers? I mean, you'd have to Black Goat it before it hits the field. Like you'd have to call Liger Dancer before they summon Liger Dancer, and then they can't make it. But like you can't really. No, once it hits the field, the Black Goat doesn't help you much with removing it. You can, yeah, you can stop them from activating it, but that doesn't help you out it if you don't have an out. That's what I mean. Like you can banish it from grave and say like you can't activate Liger Dancer this turn, but you still can't you still can't out it. Then is the problem. Yeah, that's just another issue to the list of issues with Sky Striker, which is like it's getting to a point where I think this deck is really strong, but just exactly right now, there might be slightly too many issues for me to choose it over Vanquish Soul in the current format. Because, like, your end board is good enough, but not the strongest. Droll Lockbird messes you up badly. The Lunalight Towers seems to be a real problem. Maybe Malice is also not pleasant when it messes up your spell count in the graveyard with Whitebinder. That can also be a thing. And we don't even have the full extra deck utility. Now, I will say the extra deck utility, I think, is the point that matters the least. I think Sky Striker Ace Camellia, while it was a super awaited card for Sky Striker players, but like with the release of Sky Striker Ace 0, I think Sky Striker Ace Camellia kind of falls off. Like I think this card is not that important anymore after 0 comes out, because the way this the reason why this card was so good is because it was able to send Engage from deck to grave to add it back, so you had access to it, and like now you just do it with 0 instead. Then we have Combined Maneuver Engage 0, which I think is not that important. It's a way to clear boards when you're going second, because when it attacks, if you have Ray and Rose in the grave, you can Raigeki the opponent. This is neat. It's a neat tool when you have to go second. I don't think it's that important. I don't think this card is that important. It would be nice to have, no doubt, but like I don't think it's that big of a problem. Amatsu, on the other hand, would be pretty annoying to not have. You can only special summon prototype Sky Striker Ace Amatsu once per turn. When a monster your opponent controls with 2000 or more attack activates its effect, you can make the activated effect become destroy a Sky Striker Ace link your opponent controls. When an attack is declared involving this card and an opponent's monster, you can target a Sky Striker Ace monster you control and a card your opponent controls, destroy them. This card is like a significantly better tag out on the opponent's turn than Kaina. Because out of the Sky Striker Link monsters, the ones that Ray can tag out into on the opponent's turn, like the ones that do something, are 0, because you can tag out into Ray Rose, pop a card. Kaina, which stops a monster from attacking. And Amatsu, which is like a lot better than Kaina, because it also punishes attacks, but it also just stops a monster with 2000 or more attack. Plus, this is also something that you can make when you play into a board. Like it's like when your opponent has, I don't know, any monster with 2000 or more attack that they are threatening to summon and use the effect of, like, I don't know, a Whitebinder against Malice. Like when you make this, you are checking the Whitebinder for the time being. Or when you make this, you are checking at least one activation. Like the detonator needs 2 pops to pop something instead of just 1. This kind of stuff, right? It's a pretty neat card that I would really like to have, but we don't have it. And I don't think that makes Striker unplayable, but it just adds another point to the list of small little issues that Sky Striker has at the moment. But nonetheless, I think that this deck is going to be interesting, and I think it's a deck, like, my hope personally, and there is a little bit of copium in here, but I don't think it is too unrealistic, is that maybe right now Sky Striker is not super well positioned in the format because Droll and Lockbird is extremely popular. I think that's my biggest issue with the deck. But I think there is a realistic future where they hit Ryzeal on the next ban list, whenever that might be. And because Ryzeal is the main reason that people play so much Droll and Lockbird right now. It's not even like pure Mitsurugi Droll and Lockbird is not even that good against. It's Ryzeal. The Ryzeal versions like Heraldic, Onomat, which we're going to look at as well, and like Ryzeal Mitsurugi, those decks are the ones that are forcing people to play Droll and Lockbird. There's other stuff that Droll is good against, but that's mostly like tier 2 rogue-ish stuff, like at least popularity-wise. Like Mermail and White Forest are like, Droll is good against them, but they're not as popular to justify main decking 3 draws and everything. If they hit Ryzeal properly on a future ban list in 1, 2, 3 months, I don't know when, then this deck might be interesting again. If we are in a format where Droll and Lockbird is not the #1 choice, then this deck is interesting, because this deck doesn't care that much about a lot of other stuff. You know, Molcharmi Perulia, you don't care. You summon 1 from the hand max, pretty much. Huvalos is slightly inconvenient, but you can deal with it. You know, like you go 0 pass into a Fuva, that's 1 draw, and you get a decent chunk of setup depending on how it goes. I think it's fine. Bystials are a problem. Why are Bystials a problem for this deck? Like, it's not 2019 anymore, where you 100% rely on getting Ray back from the grave when they kill your Link monster. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think the only time where a Bystial would hurt you is if they banish your only copy of Rose. You need Ray? Yeah, but you get 1 from the deck with 0 on the opponent's turn. If you, depending on how you end and stuff like that. There's no problem if they banish 1 Ray with a Bystial. Like, it's not like a Bystial is a bad card against you, but it's not like a problem. It really isn't. Banishing Rose is more annoying, but like Rose usually isn't in the grave, right? Like the first time you summon Rose, I think is mostly from the deck with 0. So at the point where they can Bystial your Rose, you already have used the 0 effect to destroy once, right? So I don't think that's the biggest problem. Most of the time, but if you enter a big grind game, it becomes an issue. It can, yeah, it can, but I wouldn't call it a huge problem for the deck. Oh yeah, so that's Sky Striker. As much as I would like to play this deck, I am leaning more towards the next candidate, which of course is Vanquish Soul, which by far has the most entries here from the OCG at the moment, because it is by far the best deck in the OCG at the moment. And I don't think the last OCG ban list is going to change anything about that, because the only thing the recent OCG ban list did to this deck is ban Paradise Smasher, which I don't even think is that important. Now, the thing that I want to talk about, and the thing that I feel like is the biggest question for this deck, is the fact that, of course, in the OCG right now, this deck is the best deck in the format, but it is also being paired with a secondary engine that is pretty strong. And that's the K9 cards, of course. And we are not going to have these cards for the EUWCQ and the NAWCQ until the end of July, basically. These cards are in Justice Hunters, and Justice Hunters comes out pretty much I think it's the last weekend of, or the last week of July, so after both NAWCQ and EUWCQ, so we won't be able to play K9 Vanquish Soul. Now, the question remains, is Vanquish Soul maybe good enough already without the K9 cards? And while the K9 cards are incredibly strong, I will say after my first couple of attempts with this deck, I do still think that this deck is capable of performing even without the K9 cards. Even though it's only going to be for a very short period of time, because once the K9 cards come out, I'm sure people are going to play those two together. I think for the month of July, where we don't have the K9 cards yet, I think this deck is an option. Currently, at least, I'm pretty optimistic that I can play this deck at Euros. And once again, the deciding factor on whether I'm going to play this deck at Euros or not is not whether it's the best deck in the format by far. Like, I'm willing to play this deck if it's the 3rd best deck or something, behind Malice or Ryzeal, Mitsurugi or whatever, because I just want to play this deck. You know, I really want to play this deck. I think it looks really fun. But like, I think it could be up there. I personally think it could be like a top 3, top 4, top 5 decks in the current format. I need more testing to see if that's actually the case, but I think this deck is pretty strong. I don't know if it's going to be better than Malice, but look, if let's say this deck is slightly worse than Malice, I'm still going to play this deck, is how I'm feeling about it. So the reason why I think this deck is so powerful, of course, we've talked about it already in the last TCG discussion, but I think Holy Sue is by far what I'm struggling to really think of a better legacy support card in a long time for an archetype. Like, I'm trying to think of another support card, like one singular support card that was so perfect for a deck as Vanquish Soul Holy Sue. Like, I don't know if I can think of another card that is this level of perfect for the deck. Mathmech Circular, I guess. You know, honestly, the card is not exactly circular, but it is comparable to how perfect Circular was for Mathmech, right? Double Helix, yeah, it's literally a crazy level of legacy support, which makes me think, like, you know, we've talked about how good the deck building pack archetypes have been recently, right? Like the amount of decks out of deck build packs that were really strong is pretty crazy, right? And one of the exceptions to this was actually Vanquish Soul, right? Vanquish Soul was a deck that, even though I really liked it when it came out, it never really had that sort of breakthrough performance that other deck building pack decks had. Like, because there was a lot of them that had like they weren't good right away, but they got support and then they became strong. Like Pearly, like Rescue Ace, like Labyrinth, like a lot of them. A lot of deck building pack archetypes have become meta recently. Recently in the last like 2 or 3 years, deck build packs have been significantly more impactful to the meta than some other packs, I would argue. Even some core sets are not as impactful as some of these deck building packs these days. And Vanquish Soul was one of the exceptions. Of course, there's other decks that weren't super strong out of deck build packs, but like Vanquish Soul was one that I was particularly disappointed in, that it didn't actually take off, because I thought the deck was really fun. And now Vanquish Soul Holy Sue basically makes this deck, I think this card alone is good enough to make this deck a lot more powerful, but Vanquish Soul start is also a huge deal for this deck, of course. Like the ability to now start your plays with Mad Love is crazy. Now let's think about how this deck is going to see play in the TCG. And I think, luckily for us, I think the making the shift away from Canine Vanquish Soul to regular Vanquish Soul is not that difficult, because as good as the Canine cards are in this deck, they are basically just quote unquote more hand traps / non-engine that have the right attributes for you, right? Like they are good, but like it's not like the deck changes entirely if you just play other non-engine instead. Of course, you're going to lose a lot of the rank 5 toolbox, and they are going to be whatever other hand traps you play instead of the Canine cards, they are going to be worse hand traps. And being able to make like some of the make a Ripper or something, like you can transform your Vanquish Soul cards into the Canine engine as well. So you're going to miss that option. Even when you don't draw any of the canines, you can't get into it. Like, for example, overlaying Holy Sue and Jiaolong into a Ripper is no longer a play. But like, still, I think Vanquish Soul has what it takes to become a top meta deck for a couple of reasons. I think the deck is now consistent enough. I think if you play enough fire and dark attributes to make Holy Sue a starter consistently, I think the deck is consistent enough because you've got Holy Sues, you got Raisin, you got Mad Love, you got Stake Your Soul, which is a starter if you draw it with any dark or fire, which is fine. Or even, with an Earth and other attributes, you can get Holy Sue immediately. And you can even play, you have Rhoda and you have Vanquish Soul start, which can sometimes help you get going if you draw it with like a random Vanquish Soul that it doesn't play, which this deck doesn't run, but so that I think that's enough starters to make it a consistent deck for Vanquish Soul. And I think there's another thing that was missing for Vanquish Soul, which is the ceiling, right? Like Vanquish Soul was always just a little bit light on ceiling, because even the best Vanquish Soul hands would be limited to something like, okay, I'm gonna draw a card or two with Borger, one going first, one on my opponent's turn. I can search some stuff with Jiaolong, that's cool. I can maybe summon Raisin in the right column to pop something from my opponent with my Rock of the Vanquisher. But if they imperm the Rock of the Vanquisher, then I get that I lose a significant portion of my interruptions, because then I can't go Raisin and pop something. You have Caesar Valius to pop a card, but I'm gonna be honest with you, getting all 3 attributes for Caesar Valius was not always that easy, because you were missing, like, usually you were missing the Earth in rotation. Because very often you would search Caesar Valius, but you'd be missing another Earth, because there wasn't really another good Earth that was easy to access for Vanquish Soul. And what you were also not always able to set up was the Vanquish Soul trap card, which was one of the most powerful. It was one of the most powerful endboard pieces for Vanquish Soul, but you weren't always able to search it because you had to basically either hard draw Madlove, or you needed to you needed to use your Raisin search on Madlove, which sometimes significantly limited the amount of other things you could do. You know, like if you have to go Raisin for Madlove into the trap, there's no guarantee you have even an Earth monster in your hand to resolve the trap. And so like it was just it always felt like it was missing something. And even if you were lucky enough to have everything, you still only basically had a Raisin pop, a Caesar pop, and the Snow Devil Raigeki, which was not bad, but also not always enough against a lot of decks in the format. And now the thing, just the existence of Holy Sue and Vanquish Soul Start, I think is going to change this deck fundamentally to a point where this deck's endboard is now really, really strong. It's incredibly difficult to break a Vanquish Soul board now if they properly set up. Which the thing is now with Holy Sue, you will always have all the attributes in rotation, because Holy Sue is an Earth that after you've used its effect, you can just return it to your hand to summon Borger or Valius, and then you have the Earth in your hand for the rest of the turn. And it's incredibly easy for this deck now to juggle the attributes, to always have the attributes you need to activate every single one of these effects. Like it is very realistic that a Vanquish Soul player going first, if they have a starter, are able to resolve every single Vanquish Soul effect that they want to, right? Which means that on the opponent's turn, this deck now gets to consistently do the following things. You get to Raisin pop a monster. You get to Madlove bounce an opponent's monster with low defense. You get to take control of an opponent's monster with Vanquish Soul Holy Sue. You get to pop a card with Caesar Valius. And if they can play through all of that, you can use Vanquish Soul Snow Devil to Raigeki their board and make your board indestructible by card effects for the rest of the turn. Alongside the fact that Vanquish Soul Start makes one of your Vanquish Souls unable to be destroyed by battle as well by revealing a Vanquish Soul from your hand. So the combination of Snow Devil and Start makes it so that, like, basically your board can't really die. You have multiple pops, a bounce, a steal, and a Raigeki for everything. And on top of all that, even if that somehow miraculously is not enough, you have probably drawn 2 extra cards with Heavy Borger in a deck that can play a decent amount of non-engine. Right? They are not playing they are not playing that much non-engine here in this build if you don't count the K9 cards, even though they are kind of non-engine, but like all of these K9 cards are probably going to be replaced by non-engine in the TCG, right? So like you have room in this deck for upwards of, I mean, it is probably around 15 plus non-engine without a problem. And so you're gonna be there with a decent amount of disruption on the opponent's turn. After drawing with Borger. So I think this deck's endboard is looking incredible, and I think there's a couple of advantages that this deck could have in the upcoming format over other decks, which is the fact that this deck can basically play almost in its entirety on the opponent's turn, which is pretty crazy if you think about it, because the current format is dominated by quote-unquote turn skips. And I think this deck is the deck in the game that cares the least about turn skips. Because if you get Charmeat in this deck, you can just say go and do the things on your opponent's turn. Most of them. Not all of them, but most of them. If you get rolled, the same thing applies. If you get rolled, you can just call it a day after you get your first search, pass the turn, and do most of the things on your opponent's turn. How good is it into Nibiru? So this deck has the ability to completely... Basically, it's up to the player. I personally think Nibiru is terrible against this deck if played properly. Because I think this deck's full setup does not need more than 4 summons, no matter how you draw with this deck. I think Nibiru should never be activatable against a good Vanquish Soul player unless they have to commit into like let's say they have like 1 or 2 other hand traps that force you to commit more. Yeah. How will it out at towers? So this is where I guess we can discuss how this deck will be adjusted for the TCG, because basically there is I personally I've seen people play in the OCG. Not this list doesn't do it. Why is this here? Is this a mistake? Am I tripping? That has to be wrong, right? There's no way. That's just a mistake on the site. That makes no sense. Probably a third Rescue Ace Impulse, right? What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. I think a somewhat realistic win con, at least against one Liger Dancer, is that you just burn them to death, right? Because only the Liger Dancer is unaffected. Everything else you can interact with. And the field spell and the trap make it so that you can maybe stop your stuff from being destroyed. And you just summon like a bunch of Vanquish Souls, protect them with these two, and just pop everything else they try to do, and resolve Borger Burn a couple of times. It's a matchup I'd have to practice. I don't know exactly how easy that would be. But you can out it, I think. I've seen people play Kurikara in this deck. I've seen people play Kaijus just as like 1 or 2 ofs. I think that's more of an OCG thing because of Maxi. Like they like to play like 1 copy of Kaiju or 1 copy of Kurikara, because if I Maxi my Lunalight opponent and they just go, okay, well I'll pull through, then you probably draw that card. I don't know if it's the same in the TCG with like Fuvalos. Speaking of Fuvalos, I think that is the most interesting question, and that's also the question that I don't have an answer to yet for myself with Vanquish Soul, is what non-engine do you play in Vanquish Soul? Because Vanquish Soul has this interesting and weird dynamic where you kind of really want your non-engine to be the right attributes, because it really does help the consistency in this deck if you have the right attributes in your hand. And I think that becomes even more important with Vanquish Soul Holy Sue, because, I mean, we've talked about it before, but Vanquish Soul Holy Sue is hands down the best hand trap in this deck, and it's not even close. Like, when you draw this card with the right attributes, it's crazy. Because let's say you draw this card with a Fire and a Dark. Drawing Vanquish Soul Holy Sue with a Fire and a Dark basically equals full setup for you plus 2 pops as a hand trap, which is crazy value. It's 2 pops and basically you have a board already and you have follow up the next turn. Because what you do when you draw this thing with a Fire and a Dark is you wait for your opponent. Let's say your opponent normal summons a Dormouse, right? And you go, okay, Holy Sue special into not the column of Dormouse. That's the only important thing. You have to not summon into the Dormouse column. Then you go Holy Sue effect, reveal Fire and Dark to special Raisin from the deck into the column of the Dormouse. Then you go Raisin effect to add Caesar Valius from your deck to your hand, which means you at this moment have Fire, Dark, and Earth in your hand. So you can use Fire, Dark to destroy the Dormouse in Raisin's column. And then if they have a way to extend, let's say they special a Bestial or a March Hare to bring back the Dormouse from Banished, what you can do is you can use Caesar Valius to return the Holy Sue to your hand, which means you had Fire, Dark, and Earth in your hand beforehand. The Earth was Caesar, so the Caesar is now on the board, but the Holy Sue is back in your hand, so you still have Earth, Fire, Dark. So you can use Valius to non-target pop the Extender as well, or the Dormouse in this scenario, right? So like one Holy Sue with the right attributes is double pop, and you have perfect follow-up, and you even have a board already, which is nuts. That is nuts for a going second card, which is just another reason as to why this card is definitely the best support card a deck has probably maybe ever gotten. It's definitely up there, maybe top 3 or something. So I feel like a lot of your non-engine should be Fire and Darks. And one engine that I really want to play in this deck, because I also think it's incredibly fun. Because when I'm thinking Fire and Dark non-engine, my drawing loving ass head immediately thinks of cards like Rescue Ace Impulse and Fantastical Dragon Phantasme, both Fire and Dark, that don't really stop your opponent, but they give you they are the right attributes, and they do give you more access to the they give you higher chances of drawing your Holy Sue, basically, right? Because your opponent starts playing, you don't have Holy Sue just yet, or you're missing the right attributes. Like, let's say you're missing a Fire, then your opponent makes a link, you go Phantasme, draw 2, maybe you have the right attributes after. And the same is true for the Rescue Aces. So those are just cards that I would really like to play in this deck. So my current version of the deck has those cards. Of course, basically at that point, you are putting a lot of eggs into one basket, quote unquote, right? You are putting a lot of eggs into the Holy Sue basket. Like if you have a Phantasme and it doesn't get you to Holy Sue, then maybe it hasn't achieved that much. And also with Phantasme in particular, I mean, both of those packages have a small downside. With Phantasme, the downside is that Ryzeal is in the format, and there are some Ryzeal decks that will never link summon, which is a problem. Of course, you can side it out, however, but like it's a little bit of a risk if you main deck Phantasme and then you go second and it's Ryzeal. With Impulse, the downside is of course having to play the Fire Attacker. Now, I will say I think the Fire Attacker is not the biggest problem, because at the end of the day, I think Fire is the most important attribute for this deck. So worst case scenario, if you draw a Fire Attacker, at least it's still a Fire that you can reveal for everything, right? Which is okay. It's just basically going to be in your hand until you find... I mean, you can Phantasme it back, which is kind of cool. But that's also niche. That's not always going to work. But yeah. So that's something I was considering. There's other non-engine that you can play that has the correct attributes. So I think you have a lot of choices when it comes to countering the metagame with this deck. Like, for example, DD Crow is interesting. Ghost Bell is pretty good in the TCG right now. You know, Ghost Bell is not bad against Malice, and it's also good against Mitsurugi. But also, I do think Earth is the worst attribute out of the 3 in this deck. Like, Earth is the least important, because you want Fire and Dark in every hand. Like, those are the ones that let you special with Holy Sue, which is the more important effect. And it's also the ones you need if you draw Stake Your Soul. You need an Earth or a Dark if you have Stake Your Soul. Stake Your Soul with an Earth monster like Bell is not nearly as good. Like, if I have to Stake Your Soul with the Holy Sue, like into Holy Sue, I still need Fire and Dark anyways to do something with it, right? And the same is true for Caesar. Like, I can summon Caesar, but if I don't have Fire and Dark, then it doesn't do anything, right? So Fire and Dark is always the higher priority. So I don't actually know if Bell makes the cut. I don't know if Bell makes the cut simply because Earth is by far the least important attribute in this deck. And I think if you are looking for graveyard interaction with the right attribute, I think Crow and Bystials come to mind that probably are stronger. And depending on how the format shapes up, I think those cards are decent right now. I mean, DD Crow is a solid card against Mitsurugi. DD Crow is a good card against Mermail. DD Crow is even not bad in the mirror, because you can banish like Raisin when they try to add it back with the rock, which can be valuable. So like, you know, DD Crow has applications in most matchups, right? You go, you can go DD Crow against Sky Striker as well, if that's a thing. DD Crow is probably decent against Lunalight. Like DD Crow just seems very, very valuable in the upcoming format. So I think DD Crow is likely to be a thing. And then the biggest question, I suppose, is how many cards would you want to play that don't have the right attributes, right? Like how many hand traps are you willing to play that don't have the matching attribute in this deck? Like how valuable is, let's say, a Molcharmy in this deck? Let's say Fuvalos, right? Because conceptually, Molcharmy Fuvalos is crazy in this deck if you open it, right? Like if you go second and you Fuva your opponent, cards that draw more cards are the craziest in this deck in particular, right? Like playing into a Fuva against Vanquish Soul is madness because they are gonna, if they draw Holy Su, the game ends because you can't extend to punish the Holy Su. Like if you play into Fuva or into Perulia too much, like it's done, you know? Of course, the problem with those cards is that they do nothing when this deck goes first. And the other problem in a world where you do play Phantasme and Rescue Aces in this deck, the Charmies are also bad draws off of those cards. You know, if I draw a Charmy off of Phantasme, of course I can shuffle it back, but it still has kind of like not had a purpose then, right? Like I didn't really get to do anything with it. And sometimes you draw like a you draw Holy Su and you don't have the right attributes. It can be awkward. So in a perfect world, I would like to play no non-engine that has the wrong attributes, quote unquote, right? Like I wouldn't be playing the Charmies if I don't absolutely have to. Now the problem is maybe going second, you still absolutely have to. Like at the very minimum, you're gonna side deck some Charmies in this deck, I think. But like it's questionable whether this deck in particular wants to main deck it. There's one engine that used to be very popular in Vanquish Soul in the past that I would not expect to see play at all right now. I don't think it's good, and that's Kashtiras. I think Kashtiras are not good in this deck anymore, simply because they do a couple of things that are bad for this deck. First of all, they have terrible synergy with Holy Su, because when you go second, you typically have something on the board if the deck goes right. Fenrir being Earth, like we said earlier, is the least important attribute. And when you're going first, you like all the good setup. Let's talk about Nibiru for a second, because all the good setups in Vanquish Soul are 4 summons, and if you summon a Fenrir beforehand, you get cooked by Nibiru for no reason. So the reason why this deck should not lose to Nibiru is because the 4 summons you should make in your main phase are always basically Vanquish Soul Raisin, Dr. Madlove, Holy Su, and Rock. Those are the only 4 summons that you should perform in your main phase. If you, I think at least, I think those should always be the 4 summons you make in the TCG before K9. I'm talking TCG before K9 right now. Your setup should always be those 4 summons in your main phase with the field spell. That's going to set you the trap in the end phase. If you play the hand in the right order, you can even potentially still have the Holy Su effect open to special in the end phase. So let's say you open Dr. Madlove, okay? Let's say you open Dr. Madlove and your hand has a good amount of different attributes. You can go Madlove into start, search Raisin, link Madlove into Rock, special Raisin, search Holy Su, special Holy Su, right? And once you've done that, you might be tempted to go like, oh, I'm going to go Holy Su to special and I'm going to keep going and stuff like that. At that point, your board is Rock, Raisin, Holy Su, plus start. What you want to do with that setup is you want to go to end phase. You want to go ahead and you want to activate start to get the Snow Devil set up. And then you can use Holy Su to special summon more monsters in the end phase. So what you want to do in this instance is you can just go Holy Su, special Borger in the end phase and get your draw anyways. And if you have the right attributes in your hand, you can even, after you reveal the dark for Borger to draw a card, you can special Jiaolong from your hand and still get your search in the end phase. There's no reason to do the Jiaolong or the Borger in your main phase unless you absolutely have to. Like, let's say when you normal summon Madlove and they imperm it and you have a Borger in hand, of course you're going to dodge. But that's a different story then. Then you can reconsider after you do that. But if you do just the normal combos for this deck, you don't have to do more than 4 summons in the main phase. Which is why Nibiru should never really hit this deck in the TCG. Of course, with K9 cards, it's all different. The combo lines are a little different, and you also have more extension through Nibiru if it does happen. But, yeah. Borger needs to be summoned in main phase with its own effect, yes, but not with Holy Su. Holy Su can do it in the end phase. You can just go Holy Su, activate in end phase, special Borger, and then draw in end phase. Yeah. So, that's how I currently feel about this deck. I maybe you can tell I have put some thought into this deck already. I'm pretty passionate about this. I think currently the chances are higher that I play this deck at Euros than I play Sky Striker. I want to emphasize that I still am not sure how strong this deck really is compared to Malice and or Ryzeal Mitsurugi, because I think going second as the thing is I just think the way this deck tries to win going second is cool. You know, I like the idea of playing like Phantasme and Rescue Aces and trying to go Holy Su instead of just doing the good old I'ma droll you, I'ma charmy you kind of game when I go second. That just looks it looks more fun to me and looks more appealing. And I do if I think there's a chance that's good enough, I am gonna play it. I still think this deck looks somewhat weak going second unless you draw specifically Holy Su. If you draw Holy Su, I think this deck is completely fine going second. But if you don't, and you don't play Charmies, and you don't play Droll, there are some matchups that are going to be difficult. You know, like there's going to be difficult matchups because you might not be able to fully stop them. Because you have lower quality non-engine than in the OCG, right? The K9 cards are crazy interruptions as well as crazy hand traps, right? So like, these cards are going to be missing when you go second with this deck. Like, drawing a DD Crow does not feel the same as drawing Izuna. But I still want to give this deck a fair shot. And I still think going first, it's absolutely good enough. I think going second is going to have to be seen. But yeah. Someone was asking earlier how the Nash Knight works. So Nash Knight is a rank 5. This is an option that you can basically already play in the TCG if you want to. Because even though we don't have the K9 cards yet, this deck is still capable of making rank 5s pretty easily if you choose to play some, because Holy Su Summon Jiaolong is an instant rank 5 already. And Nash Knight is one of the options that they have been using in the OCG. 2 level 5 monsters. It's also, even though I think this card is a common or has a common print, and even that is like 3 euros at the moment, which is kind of crazy. And I don't even think it's that old, but I don't know exactly. Cannot be destroyed by battle while a number monster is on the field. During the main phase quick effect, you can detach 2 materials from this card, attach a number exceeds from your extra deck to this card as material that has a number between 101 and 107 in its name. Then you can attach 1 other face-up monster on the field to this card as material. You can only use this effect of Nash Knight once per turn. So it is a disruption, right? Quick effect, attach a monster on the field to it and attach a number monster from extra deck to it. But I think more importantly, you can then rank it up into the CXYZ Nash Knight, which can also be XC summoned by using Nash Knight you control, cannot be destroyed by card effects. You can detach a material from this card, special from your extra deck, a number XCs that has a number between 101 and 107, using this face-up card you control as material, but destroying during your opponent's next end phase. So what you do is you go Nash Knight, you attach Silent Honor Arc to it, you go Chaos Nash Knight on it, and then that ranks it up into the C101 Silent Honor Dark, which is once per turn, target a special summon monster, attach it to this card as material. When this card is destroyed, special summon from your graveyard, then gain life points equal to the original of this card. If this card is special summoned this way, don't then target special summon when this card is destroyed. Wait, why is this so good? This is not even the broken one, right? They're not even doing the Masquerade. Isn't Masquerade the crazy thing? Okay, so they're just using this as like removal, right? Because if you do this entire thing, you basically get to removal multiple cards, right? This is just a removal option. This is just Nash Knight attaches one. Then you go into the C101, which also attaches another one. So it basically gets to double suck the opponent. Crazy stuff. Okay, but there's another one. Oh no, this was the same list. I think Masquerade is the one that's absolutely nuts. Okay, they also play this one. Also, I think a quick note about Vanquish Soul Rocks. This is the least important support card in the new set. I do think it's going to be played in the TCG for sure. In the OCG, they don't play it at the moment because they have a huge amount of like rank 5 toolbox in here. It's not the same for the TCG. I think Vanquish Soul Rocks is going to have a slot in the TCG. Just trying to find the Masquerade right now. Dude, they all play the Honor Arc. Here it is, this one, yeah. So you do the same thing with Nash Knight, where you attach, instead of attaching Honor Arc, you attach Masquerade to it. Oh, this list is also main decking Phantasme and Impulse. This is based. Attach this to Nash Knight, then Nash Knight ranks up into C Nash Knight, and then C Nash Knight ranks up into C104 Umbral Horror Masquerade, which is, it destroys a spell trap, but it also is, if this card has number 104 Masquerade as an Xyz material, it gains this effect. Once per turn, during either player's turn, when a monster is activated on your opponent's side of the field, you can detach an Xyz material from this card, negate the activation, then you can send a random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard, and if you do, half your opponent's life points. This is pretty crazy. This is pretty crazy. Check the price of C104. Yeah, these cards have a lot of these random chaos numbers have gone up in price because of, you know, this. So C104, oh yeah, dude. C104 is, dude, you get like a completely destroyed one for 15 bucks. Is that the only print of the card? Oh no, there's ulti as well. Thank God. Okay. Yeah, this is a super rare from Judgment of Light, which I think is like a set from 2015 or something. The ulti is like 85. Dude, I think I ordered some of these like a while ago. I don't know if it was this one. I ordered one of them as an ulti, I think. It might be this one. But that was like months ago. Like I think I was reading one of the servers on my Discord channel. One of the channels on my Discord server, that way around, and they were talking about how some of the chaos numbers were starting to go up. And I think I bought one of these. I think it was this one. But it was only, I only made the good call because I was looking at at the Discord. Otherwise I could never. But yeah. What about is the other one going up as well? The Silent Honor Dark? Probably, right? Oh, but that has reprints. Okay, that's different. Because this one has a bunch of, like, this one has a common. That's probably not a problem. Yeah. Yeah. This one's not that. This one's not expensive. That's good. Does this one have an ulti as well? They're all so old. They might have, this one has an ulti. Yeah, but the ulti is expensive. Yeah. Judgment of the Light was the Spellbook of Judgment set. Oh, I think you're right. I think it is the Judgment of the Spellbook of Judgment set. This is 2013 then, even not even 2015. Yeah. What about C107? Wait, which one is C107? Well, that's a Maze of the Master rare. There's no way that's expensive. Yeah, that's not a problem. I guess the only problem is really the one that doesn't have a reprint, which is the Masquerade one. Which I think is the one I ordered like months ago, so that's good. C106. Okay, dude. Okay, at this point, we're gonna go through all of them, all right? C106. It's just 7. Giant Red Hand. I've never seen this one played. Yeah, this one's not worth anything. All right, C105. Before anyone asks, what is C105? Batlin Boxer, dude. 2 cents, not a problem. We looked at C104. What is C103? Ragna Affinity. Ragna Affinity has 1 print as a rare from Primal Origin, and that is slowly creeping up. But I think that is because of different reasons. I don't think they played this one ever in K9 Vanquish Soul. I think this one was like 7th Tachyon. This was the one that you used, like, because it's a fairy rank 5, you can search Lancia with it. But it's also water, I guess, so like shark decks can play it. Because I remember for Lancia, you can also play a different one. Because for Lancia, you can also just play the Masquerade. Right? For Lancia, you can play the regular number 104 because that's a that is a fairy. No, it's light. Right? Oh no, wait, it's not the right level though. You need the rank 5. So which one can you do for Lance? There's another one, C102. Okay, that's the one we're gonna look at next, anyways. Yeah, the Seraph. This. Oh no. Oh wait. Maybe this is the one I ordered. Oh, I think this might be the one I ordered. I think I remember ordering this one. Oh no. Oh no. I mean, it's still not. It's still more than what I paid for it. So this one was still good, but I'm not gonna need this one right now. I might need the other one. Maybe I ordered both copium. I'd have to check. I'd have to check. I'm gonna check later. I'll update you. Yeah, I agree. It's still a good card to have. But a moment ago, I thought I owned this one in Ulti. Which one was it? Yeah, I thought it was this one, and this one is way more expensive. It would be nicer if I owned this one than this one. But I'm like 99% sure I ordered this one. I'm not sure if I ordered both. Because I remember looking into the chaos numbers a while ago and getting some of them just to be ready. But I don't know if I got this one. I don't know. Damn it. Okay, well, C102, C101 is the Silent Honor Dark. Okay, so we've looked at all of them now. You can stop asking about other chaos numbers. It's okay, at least you're not me and accidentally forgot to remove your C104 on cart market, accidentally sold it for 15 like a month ago. I thought you were this dip right now. I was looking at the graph and I was like, you know what? This dip right here, this might be Herman. But then the dip says 31. So that's not. You're not even. You're way lower than that. You're off the charts. Man. Okay. Dude, okay. Well, but on another note, on a more positive note, it seems like this is the one that you read and it reads super fancy, right? It's the one where you read it and you're like, oh, that's broken. Negate a monster effect, random card discarded, and half their life points. This seems like a crazy card. But it seems like in practice, a lot of them are actually preferring the other option here, which is the Silent Honor Dark package, because maybe it's like, okay, the removal is actually more important sometimes when you're going second than like a even bigger auto win button for going first. Right? This is the one that's going second where you can suck some of their stuff. Yeah. See, this deck does play Charmies. Only 3, but this deck does play Charmies. Because that's the thing you have to realize with this deck, dude. It's a nightmare to give them more cards. Like, it's a nightmare to give them more draws when you go first. Because it's so dangerous. This is probably one of the most dangerous decks to give extra draws. Because if they draw Holy Sue, it's Giga Jover. Oh yeah. I think Vanquish Soul looks really cool. I like this deck. I think it has a chance to perform in the TCG. I do know, however, that I do have a tendency to cope more on decks that I just like. That is definitely a thing. I am not free of that. You know, sometimes I am guilty of a little copium, and I interpret more like what's it called? More I think decks have more potential sometimes than they actually have, just because I want them to work so much. And I think that could also be the case with Vanquish Soul before K9. But ultimately, I think that's okay. Because like I said earlier, I am willing to play this deck even when it is just a little bit worse than other decks. Like if this deck is just a little bit worse than Mitsurugi, Ryzeal, or Malice, then I'm playing this deck. If it's a lot worse in testing than Malice and Mitsurugi Ryzeal, then I'm probably not playing it. But if it is just a little bit weaker, then I'm willing to accept that. But yeah. Another deck that I wanted to bring up because I actually want to try it. I don't think this deck is going to be good enough for the European Championship, but I did see that it topped. We've already talked about it. We've already looked at this list at some point. But I wanted to bring up Artmage real quick because I think this deck looks pretty fun to me, at least. That's, I think it's worth talking about because I think this one is the most likely. This is one of the most likely decks to receive strong support in the future, right? Just based off recent years, I think it'd be unreasonable to not expect this deck to become good, right? Yeah. Will you talk about the TCG tournament policy changes? What changed? Is there big news in there, or is it like nothing? It's nothing? Okay, well then no. Then I'm not gonna react to it if there's no important changes. Okay. Anyways, Artmage. So I don't know how familiar everyone is with Artmage yet, but I have read all the cards, and I will say, while I do not think this deck is good right now, I think they have a bunch of really high quality cards. Like basically all of the spell cards for this deck are pretty strong, and all the monsters also just have pretty good effects, to the point where if they just make, I don't know, one more good main deck card and one more good extra deck card for this deck, I could see this deck popping off already. And chances are this deck is getting more than one main deck card. You know, this is the new main lore archetype. This is the main reason why I'm waiting for Doom of Dimension spoilers so eagerly, right? Like I want to see what Doom of Dimension has for this deck in particular. Because these cards 100% have the potential to be top tier. Like, and I don't even know if that's a good thing, because right now I think the deck looks fun, but like, I mean, you know, there was a time, I remember a time where I was excited for Snake Eyes at some point, and then they got crazy support, and then I was not excited anymore. So it's up in the air whether this deck will be that, or like, I don't know. Basically, I think as much as this might be controversial, I think Branded is an example of a lore deck that was done really well. I think the execution for Branded was pretty darn strong in terms of like how they did it, because Branded was always meta relevant, still is arguably meta relevant, especially in Master Duel. But it was never like a tier 0 situation where it just took over the game completely and was like unbearable. Now, Branded was not perfect. I just think Branded was really well executed, but there were time frames where Branded like it wasn't super powerful, but it was pretty toxic when it did like Sanctifier into Gimmick Puppet or Expulsion into Gimmick Puppet. So there were mistakes with Branded, I think. It wasn't perfect, but it is still overall, in terms of power level, in terms of representation, in terms of meta relevance, I think Branded was pretty well done. And so basically the question is, will this be Branded or will this be Snake Eye? Right? That's my big question, because if it's like Branded in terms of power level, then I think it's going to be pretty cool. Because if they just give this deck a little bit more support to make it playable but not make it overbearingly broken, then I'd be a pretty big fan of that. Because I think the playstyle, I think this deck looks more fun than Branded. I'll say it. I think this deck looks more fun than Branded because it doesn't have the reliance on one spell card as much, like with Branded Fusion. It kind of looks like a more fun approach to a Fusion deck. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't hate Branded, but I think this one looks cooler if it gets proper support. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. For now, this is a list that we could basically play card for card in the TCG. Of course, we would be switching around some non-engine. I want to say this list might be blinding second because they're playing Dark Ruler, Lightning Storm, Super Poly, and very few hand traps. It might be a blind second list. At the same time, you are always incentivized to play... you are incentivized to play a lot of spell traps in this deck because the field spell, the Acropolis, is it requires you to discard a spell trap and then declare an Artmage to add it from your deck to your hand. Which is another thing. I don't know how much Droll and Lockbird is an issue for this deck because most of them it does a fair bit of searching, right? Like the field spell is not once per turn to search. You do have to discard a spell trap every time when you want to search with this. So that is I think it's an interesting concept because like once per turn to search a bunch of cards seems pretty broken, but when you have to discard a spell trap every time, maybe it's fine. But basically the one copy of the field spell can search your entire deck. So it should be hyper consistent. It seems very consistent for now. It's like that's what this deck has right now. It has incredible amounts of consistency, but it doesn't have the crazy payoff yet. So that's all that's missing. Like one other really good fusion monster, or maybe like one other really good main deck engine piece, and this deck is there because the field spell is consistency. This card is crazy because it just adds Medius the Pure from your deck to your hand and has bonus and is a continuous card, enabling all your other extenders. This card is crazy because it gives you the field spell, or if you already have the field spell, you add any other Artmage card from your deck to your hand. Plus it negates attacks, which is cool. And then all the monsters are also pretty high quality. So I do think I'm planning to test this deck into TCG even before new support. I'm planning to like make a build for it, bring it to locals, see what I can do with it, and then make a video out of it. That's the very minimum I'm going to do with this deck for now. I don't think I'm going to consider it for the European Championship. It's not good enough for that, I think. But it is good enough to try. At least on like a conceptual level, to understand what's going on. They need 3 types for the effects to be quick effects. Yeah, I know, but I think that's not a problem for this deck. You'll see that if you start Medius and you get Imprem, that's a big issue. Yeah, I think the best card to start is actually this one, right? Because this one is called Artmage, and all of the other... Like, I was thinking about making a version of the deck where you play more copies of these Artmages. Because all of them say... If you control an Artmage, you can special it from hand and then +1, right? I mean, all of them. There's only 3. But Graph Lair is special from hand and then set an Artmage spell. This one is special from hand, draw a card. Love me some of that. And Littera is special from hand and add an Artmage card from your graveyard back to your hand. So all 3 of these, if you have an Artmage card on the field, they just summon out for free and go +1, which is pretty cool. And so I think the most important card in this deck is actually the field spell and the Vandalism card. I don't know what it's called. This is the OCG name, Vandalism Assault. I think it has a different name in the TCG. I think maybe it is the right name because the other ones are also called Artmages already, whereas in the OCG they were called Artmagia. Let me check what the name of the card is real quick. Artmage. Oh no, it is Vandalism Assault. It is that name. Okay, it is the right name. Okay. Yeah, I think these two are the most important. Because they give you an Artmage card on the board instantly, so everything else can be special, right? Luckily, the deck has 9 copies of these cards already. You got Acropolis 3 times, you got Assault 3 times, and you got the Alteration 3 times. So you got 9 cards plus Terraforming plus whatever that instantly enable all of these guys to be special summoned. So I think there's a world where you play more copies of these cards, because like, what's the downside? You just go special Finmail, draw a card. Special Graph Layer, set a spell from your deck. Like, it's all free. It's all plus. As long as you draw an Artmage card that you can put onto the field first, you just cook. Anyone else dislike decks that don't run all 3 card types? What, like, you mean in like monster spell traps? I tend to like decks that go really heavy on one of them. I've noticed this. I have noticed this specifically with Duelist Advance, because Duelist Advance has support cards for 3 decks that I really like that really excessively play one type of card, right? So I thought about this. It has Vanquish Soul support, which is like 90% monsters. It has Sky Striker support, which is 90% spells, and it has Trapaholic, which is Paleo support somewhat. Not directly, but I mean, it does help Paleo a lot. And it's like, that's 90% traps or more. So I think that's, I noticed that like when I was thinking about that a couple of days ago, I just happen to like some of these decks that go really heavily on one card type. I mean, not all of them, of course. There's like all monster decks that are cringe, like super heavy or whatever. But specifically, super heavy spell decks, or I guess not all super heavy trap decks are cool, but super heavy spell decks I tend to like Runic or Sky Striker or whatever. Oh no, I like spells. But yeah. I was wondering when I was looking at this list and I was looking at Artmage cards and I was thinking about how to potentially make a list to bring to like locals maybe next week to try the deck out. I was wondering if maybe you should put some more emphasis on playing some spell traps that are good discards for the field spell, because you have such consistent access to the field spell. It feels like you would want to have something that gets value when discarded. I mean, they play 1 copy of the Black Goat Laughs, sure. But like, are we really not going to play other spell traps that do something in the graveyard? Like, we can go ahead and play, I don't know, Metal Foes Fusion. We can play other stuff that has good. We can side deck like for Ryzeal, you can side deck like Mischief of the Gnomes or something like that. Like, is there really nothing that we can play in this deck that makes for good discards for the field spell? Artmage Runic. You know what? As funny as it is on every new archetype to go like, I learned about Artmage Runic, I don't think that makes sense here, right? Because you don't want to overwrite the field spell, do you? Special summon an Artmage. I had this card at the sneak. I had this card at sneak preview to summon 1 copy of Medius from my deck, but I resolved it 0 times because I always drew the Medius before I drew the trap. Special 1 Artmage or Medius from your deck. Also for the rest of this turn, the activation of your cards and effects that include an effect that fusion summon a fusion monster cannot be negated. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects when a monster is fusion summoned this way. You can banish this card from your grave, target an Artmage you control, return that monster to your hand, extra deck, and if you do, destroy a card your opponent controls. Yeah, this seems like this is the kind of card that I would play in this deck, right? Because you play just 1 copy, because if you draw it, you can discard it for the field spell, and it gives you a pop in the grave, which is neat. And even if you don't want to discard it, it's not the worst thing to just set and do on your opponent's turn. Because it does give you a fusion on the opponent's turn, right? You can go Artmage Pact, special Medius the Pure on special summon, special summons the Power Patron, which unfortunately is the only one that we have at the moment, but we do have it. And then you can go quick effect fusion summon, which is neat. You can add it back with the level 3. Yeah, you discard it. You can discard it for Acropolis and then add it back with Littera. The only problem, quote unquote, with this card, which is like, I mean, it's probably good balancing, but it's also somewhat unfortunate if you're trying to make the deck work, is the fact that this is one of those cards where you would really, really love if you could use both effects on the same turn, right? Like, if you could use the first effect to special Medius and then also use the graveyard effect to pop a card your opponent controls in the same turn, it'd be crazy. This card is also really cool on your own turn, actually, right? Like, this is like, you discard it. Like, let's say you're going second and you play into a board or a half board or whatever, right? Like, let's say you go discard Awakening or Acropolis. You have a quick effect, basically dodge, right? And pop. Because this is, it's a quick effect to banish it, bounce one of your Artmages, and destroy a card. So that's really good on your own turn as well. So even the Trap card, which is normally the worst card out of a batch of new cards, like even the Trap is pretty high quality for this deck. So I don't know, man. Personally, I can't help but think this deck is going to be good eventually. Like, because I think it's even remotely playable right now. Like, let's call it a tier 2 to tier 3 deck. Maybe if we're being generous, tier 2. If we're not believing in it, then maybe tier 3. But like, the card quality is pretty high. So I personally think this deck is going to be good eventually. I don't know. I can't help. I'm really not trying to hype up the cards unnecessarily. Because ultimately there is a chance that they don't give support to this deck directly, because there's technically 2 archetypes here. Like, one of them is Artmage and the other one is like Medius the Pure as a whole. There is a world where they make more lore cards for this archetype and they are not related to Artmage. They are only related to Medius the Pure, and it's like a different deck. So basically, like, they could make the Goblin Biker equivalent, where it's not part of, like, it's technically part of the lore, but it is not part of the main deck, you know? Like, I think the lore that was the most split up between different decks was probably Visa Starfrost, where it was just like a bunch of different decks, where a lot of them were good, you know, like Tearlaments. But like, it was not technically all in one deck. You know, Monadium was a different deck than Tearlament, and that was a different deck than the whatever others. I mean, the same is true for Branded and whatever, and Scareclaw, and there's a bunch of this stuff. You never know exactly which deck is going to be good and which deck isn't, you know? I don't know. Is Artmage the Goblin Bikers, or is Artmage the Monadium, or is Artmage the Tearlament of the bunch? It's impossible to predict. So really, before you buy these cards, be aware that you're either making a really good deal or you're either making a really bad deal on, like, let's say you pick up the Acropolis right now, because I think right now it's like $20, because everyone knows that it could be good. Because if people didn't think this card had potential, then it wouldn't be $20, it'd be $5, right? Like, it'd be a way worse secret rare if people like didn't think it was eventually going to get good. But people don't know for sure it's going to get good, because if people knew it was going to get good for sure, then it'd be more expensive. So it's weird, right? It's weird to buy these cards right now. But then ultimately, if this deck does get good support, then this card is going to be more than $20. I'm afraid. Like, we are one announcement for Doom of Dimension for new Artmage cards. Like, we are one announcement away from this card being like the chase card of the set. Unfortunately, that is a possible reality that we live in, right? Like, that if they drop an announcement tomorrow for Artmage cards in Doom of Dimension and they are good, then this card is the most expensive card in Duelist Advance. And all of a sudden, it's more expensive than Sky Striker A0, it's more expensive than Lunalight Gold Leo, it's more expensive than Vanquish Soul Holy Sue, because everyone knows that Artmage is going to need three of this card to play, basically, right? And that's kind of like why this card is already more expensive than it should be, with how good it is right now. Because right now in the TCG, there's no reason to pay $20 for this card. That is all basically people guessing on how good this card is eventually going to be. Right? So, yeah. I just want to clarify that, because I am talking positively about this deck right now, but I do want everyone to be aware that buying this card right now is a little bit of a gamba, you know? You're going to have to decide for yourself whether you want to invest into this or not, which is just, I think I said this already in like a previous stream, but I don't like when this sort of stuff happens, and you basically have to guess on, should I spend $60 on 3 copies of the field spell, which is either going to be a crazy good investment because this card could go up to like 80, or if the support is disappointing, this is more realistically like a $5 card. But yeah, I all I can do basically is talk about what situation we're in, and I can also tell you what I did, and I did get 3 copies of the field spell. I did order it for like, I think 17 or whatever it was. And because I personally think there's a good chance that this deck becomes good. But yeah. For now, I'm going to be saying this deck is more rogue-ish, and I think it looks fun. I'm going to try it. I'm going to probably bring it to locals at some point in the upcoming weeks, and I'm going to report back as to how good it actually was. And maybe we'll spend a stream building it for locals. I could see that being fun, because this deck is very far from solved, I think, because almost no one is playing it in the OCG. This is the first list I have seen for this deck, I think, ever in the OCG topping a tournament. And so I think it could be a fun stream where, like, the day before locals, I just sit here and we build Artmage together and try to make it work. And then I bring it to locals and then report back on how it went. I think that could be a fun little thing we could do in the next couple of weeks at some point. For now, we're going to move on to the last deck I want to talk about. Then we're gonna do a tier list, and then we're gonna hop into some Master Duel. I think we should have some time left to play some Master Duel in a bit. Onomat Ryzeal, I think is a top tier meta contender in the TCG. Long story short, simply because I think this deck is slightly better than Heraldic Ryzeal. And Heraldic Ryzeal, if we look at current performance in the TCG, is doing decently well. Heraldic Ryzeal is a good deck at the moment in TCG. It's not the best deck, I don't think, but it is good. It is arguably, it's top 5 decks in TCG at the moment, I'm pretty sure. Like, I personally think it's behind, before Duelist Advance, I think Heraldic Ryzeal is like behind Malice, behind Mitsurugi Ryzeal, behind Pure Mitsurugi for me personally. But then you could argue it's like number 4, maybe number 5, depending on what other decks you rate highly. So I think Onomat Ryzeal, the more I think about this deck, I think this deck is better than Heraldic Ryzeal, personally. Because I think this deck is, it just has less bricks, but it feels like it does the same thing almost. Like, the entire purpose basically of these secondary engines, or like these rank 4 engines, like Dododos, like the Onomats or Heraldics, is just like to spam an absurd amount of rank 4s in a Ryzeal deck. Because normally Ryzeal already has the ability to summon like 3 rank 4s or something, and then revive something with Eclipse Twin as well or something. Like, Ryzeal already has a really high rank 4 potential. If you add another rank 4 package to it, you can make an absurd amount of rank 4s. And I think this engine just does this slightly better for Ryzeal than the Heraldics, because yes, Heraldic has a higher ceiling, because the ceiling for Heraldic Ryzeal is absurd, but there's no need for that. There's no need for a ceiling that high, I would argue. I think slightly lower ceiling for less bricks, and also better plays under Droll and Lockbird, I think is a great deal for, like, from the perspective, let's say you are currently a Heraldic Ryzeal player and you think that deck is good. Now, what you're being offered here with the new Onomat cards is basically a version of the deck that is slightly better into Droll and Lockbird and has less bricks. And the only thing you have to give up for it is maybe like the ability to make 1 less rank 4 or something. So instead of making 9 rank 4s, you're now making 8 or something, you know? But you can still do all the important things. You're still going to spam Duo Drive. You're still going to spam Detonator. You can make Baguska. You can make Emerald if you want to. You can make Eclipse Twin to loop Emerald. You can loop, if you want to, you can loop Ouroboros. No problem. You can make Banshee into Protoss if you want to in this deck as well. You don't need to be playing Heraldic for that. You can do it in this deck as well. So I would argue the ceiling for this deck is still very, very, like, it's good enough for sure, right? And so this deck seems nice in comparison to Heraldic Ryzeal, because I think both the Goblinberg as also the Warrior are both better into Drolan Lockbird than some of the Heraldic stuff. And they're also just like better draws in of itself, right? Like the deck has more starters because the Heraldic cards in Heraldic Ryzeal are actually not that good to draw, right? Like the goal of Heraldic Ryzeal is still like, okay, I want to draw the Ryzeals. I want to draw the Ryzeals, and I'm going to make the Ryzeal combos stronger because I play the Heraldic cards in my deck so I can access them with the Ryzeal cards. So in this deck, it's a little bit different because drawing the Dodo the Warrior or the Go Goblinberg is actually good. You know, like these cards actually do something. These cards are great. This is a great normal summon, and this is a great starter into, like, you can get 2 Ryzeal with these cards because they can make a rank 4. Like the Heraldic cards are actually not that good at making a rank 4 if you draw them. You'd rather just have them in your deck to search them with the Ryzeal cards. And so I think this version of Ryzeal it just seems better to me than Heraldic Ryzeal. And I can't help but think that means it's a pretty good deck, right? Because Heraldic Ryzeal is already good. So a better version of Heraldic Ryzeal, I feel like, has to still be somewhat good. At least that's how I feel about it. Because the lower ceiling cannot possibly be too low, right? Because no matter what you do, you can still easily end on Detonator, Cross, and then beforehand you have looped Ouroboros, or you have looped Emerald, or you can also make Baguska, like, or Protoss. Like, that ceiling is definitely good enough compared to Heraldic Ryzeal. No need for a higher ceiling, I think, in this deck. So I do think this deck is quite interesting. Of course, Drolan Lockbird, while I think the Warrior and the Goblinberg combo better into Drolan Lockbird, Droll is still going to be good against this deck, right? But yeah. Is Mitsurugi Ryzeal no longer viable? Oh, absolutely still is. Like, don't worry. We're going to talk about the position. Like, where the next thing I want to do after looking at these decks in more detail is a tier list where I rank them alongside the stuff that's already in the game. Yeah. You need the Heraldic's Whale Banish to Protoss going first, I'm pretty sure. So what you're saying is this deck cannot Protoss because you can't banish anything for flag? I mean, this thing says banish it when it leaves the field, but then you wouldn't be overlaying with it, I guess. I'm sure there's a way. You are right. Maybe you have to figure out exactly how you're going to get a banished card for the Nemesis flag. But I'm sure there is something you could do if you really wanted to. You can do Dugares. Dugares cannot summon from hand. You would have to get the flag into the graveyard first. You could do stuff like you can go Node Ryzeal, send the flag from hand to grave, and then revive it with Dugares or something. There's gonna be a way. There's always gonna be a way to make that happen. There's no way that's not possible. You probably have to make a different line. Or Banshee. Yeah, Banshee can just send it to grave. You don't even have to add it. Yeah, you can just send it with Banshee, revive it with Dugares, search. And that's probably worth it still, because Protoss is absurd, right? So, like, there's ways.